What's up, G supporters? It is Gabe back with another video, and things are finally starting to look normal again. Not only here in my studios, I have only done that once since my surgery, but also just for me personally. I wanted to sit down with you guys and talk about my experience with my surgery and my recoveries. I just finished editing and realized that I did not mention the surgery I had. For those who have not been on my socials, I had jaw surgery where they moved my lower jaw 9 millimeters forward and then my upper jaw 7 millimeters, and also did reconstruction on my chin and my nose. First off, why did I get surgery? Well, on April 11th, I did so because I have severe sleep apnea. I had a sleep study a couple years ago that told me that I basically stopped breathing somewhere around 130 times in the span of 5 hours when they were doing the sleep study. In order for me to regain that oxygen, I have to wake up each one of those times, and that's why I don't sleep well. That's why I had to take 5 different medications a night just to get to sleep, and half the time that didn't even work. And one of the theories were that was one of the main causes for my migraines. I've been dealing with that since I was like 7 years old. Obviously a lot of other things go into it: how much you hydrate, what your diet is like, how much you exercise, what your stress level is like. Each one of those things I dealt with in a negative way that definitely contributed to the amount of migraines I had. But there were still plenty of other times where I did not experience those things, and I still would get at least one migraine a week, if not several. And I'm very confident in saying the surgery solved both of those problems. Within the first night, I could sleep better. And ever since the night before Good Friday, I have not taken one single sleep medication. I didn't take any going into Easter weekend, as I didn't care if I didn't get much sleep. I only had a couple of days for my surgery, and I just kind of wanted to do as much as I could. Same goes the night before surgery on Monday the 10th. I had a deadline when I could stop chewing food. I believe it was something like 11 p.m. So I just shoved as much food into my mouth as I could, and I was like, I was just gonna binge watch YouTube for a while. And I haven't experienced not taking any form of sleep medication since sometime in elementary school, although I did start taking several once I got into middle school. And I've only had one migraine since April 11th, which is insanity to me. I'm so blessed about that. But your question is, at what cost? What was it like on my journey to where it was now? Even though I felt the effects of the surgery right away, how long did it take until the negative effects of the surgery went away? Well, I spent 2 nights in the hospital, the night of April 11th and then the night of April 12th. I believe I had the surgery somewhere around 7 to 8 o'clock that morning, and I know I was at least still being operated on through the 11 o'clock hour because my surgeon actually got footage to use in my upcoming movie, and it was time-stamped. So I assume we at least went through about midday, but I don't remember waking up until like 3, maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I woke up and I was like, what the heck? Like, everything just felt so weird. I had pain on my jaw right here. Everything was all stiff and numb, but that was nothing compared to what I was going to be experiencing even in the next day. My speech was very poor. It was hard to communicate with people, but I at least managed. That night though, it got even worse. They had these surgical bands in my mouth. I initially thought my jaw was going to be wired shut, but instead it was banded shut, so I could still move my jaw and my mouth slightly to where I could get a little bit of speech, but everything just sounded very distorted because I could not open that far. But they were very strong to be able to keep my mouth not going much harder than about this, just to get a little bit of syringe in there so I could hydrate and also be able to have meals from Ensures or Boost or Premier Protein, any of those protein shakes that are basically meal alternatives. So if you're in this situation, this is what you have to live on, and I did that for 6 weeks. But obviously my stomach wasn't used to that, and from the night before, I think I ate too much. I had a lot of heartburn issues going into the hospital. that morning, and I didn't quite feel sick yet, but I was kind of on the verge, like, I don't like this. And that night I threw up with the bands in here, and you could not take the bands out, because if you did that, my jaw would stretch too far, and that could risk having to do surgery again or breaking your jaw down even more than it was. But when that happened, I did open my jaw a little bit more than I did earlier that day, and that definitely brought some complications. Luckily, when that happened, the bands did not snap, because if they did, that would be huge problems, as my surgeon had actually just gotten out of town. But because of that incident, that pain got even worse that night and going into the next day. That second night, I actually had my first panic attack in a year. I used to get them all the time back in middle school when I was going into high school, and that was like the ensemble of everything wrong with me, to where I just couldn't go to school, or I would skip, or I mean, it was just a combination of migraines and panic attacks, depression and anxiety. But I finally got free of depression going into early 2022, and instead of having panic attacks multiple times a month, and back when I was in school, several days in a week, I only had one in a year. Rightfully so. I mean, I was in a really stressful situation, and I just was so much pain and everything, but I put on We Are the Messengers, Maybe It's Okay, which I had just heard for the first time 2 days before that on the drive. And that's why I included it in my Counter Threat teaser, because once I woke up from surgery, I had that song in my head, like God was playing it as I was getting operated on, after hearing it about 24 hours prior. And that ended up being the cure to the panic attack that second night. Since that footage that my surgeon shot in the operating room and my dad did once I got back, that song was playing in my mind as you saw all those clips. And I was able to symbolize the story of the actual movie without actually filming yet. Sure, we had planned on using some of this footage before, but we didn't know what it was gonna look like. It's not like we were acting at all. But before I had the panic attack earlier that day, I did make a little progress. I started walking around the hospital a little bit, but it only lasted like 5 minutes. I was like, oh man, I need to go sit down again. After I woke up from my second night in the hospital, on day 3 of me being there, I was able to get around a lot more. And I was able to get more supplements down, because we had a target on how much of the protein shakes that I needed to get down before I was discharged. And I did it. We went out that afternoon. At this point, we stayed the next week right next to the hospital, because I still wasn't feeling great and didn't want to go travel back and forth 5 hours across the state and feel even worse. And that second week before we left, I actually started to get improvement. I still had pain, but it wasn't 24/7, but I still couldn't do much, but at least I was able to walk around enough to have the motivation to get more of those supplements down me so I don't fall behind on my nutrition. So after we had that post-op appointment, I went home with that positive attitude, but it did not last very long, because through week 3 and 4, I felt little to no improvement, and I was getting really annoyed. I was like, seriously? If anything, the pain got worse at times. I mean, it wasn't constant, but it kept going on and off, to where I was like one morning I would be like, oh, I feel pretty good right now. And by the afternoon, oh, this is terrible. And that's like the worst for me. I either want no pain at all or pain all the time. If it goes back and forth, it is just the worst. So that's kind of what I was dealing with throughout week 3 and 4. But at least I regained a little bit of motivation, because I was a little bored, to come here to my studio, do a little bit of work on my computer. Didn't last more than a couple hours though. Couldn't handle any more than that, and I would just go back to resting or watching TV. I still was taking a lot of pain meds though. Although came week 5, it was my second post-op appointment, and wow, I had low expectations from that 5-hour drive. It's always the worst when I'm in the car, but no, this is the first time in my recovery that the car ride was the best part out of anything that I experienced up until this point. It got so well that week that I pretty much went off pain meds. My surgeon cleared me for light exercise and moved my final post-op appointment from week 9 to week 7. So from this point, it was only 2 weeks away. And she wanted me to start having puree food. So that week I did try mashed potatoes, but I didn't really like it. Because first off, I was never a fan of mashed potatoes before. I kind of had high expectations because I was like, oh, maybe things will be different this time because I haven't chewed for a month and it's been a while since I've had mashed potatoes. But no, I didn't really like it. And I was really nervous to try anything else since all those soft foods that you don't chew just did not sound very good to me. And I was getting hooked on one of these supplements, the Boost Cinnabon. I love that thing, and to this day I still have it because it's just so good, which is a great change before because all the other flavors I hated, other than the Cappuccino Delight Slim Fast that I discovered as well, that I also still have occasionally. So once I got back home from that appointment, I started hiking up our property because I wanted to start getting somewhat in shape for my new movie, and I just started doing that every day. And I would have sworn I got on the scale every day after that, and every single time I lost a half a pound, which was awesome. As I'm editing this, I also did want to mention that I lost 18 pounds total throughout the recovery of my surgery. In fact, 15 were lost just in the first week. That's the power of that liquid diet. I swear, it could have not came at a better time in terms of this new movie I'm working on. Going on to week 6, I still stayed with the liquid diet, but I was able to transition from the syringe to a cup. I was able to get things down much faster, but it took me a while to get to that point because the few times I tried that beforehand in the earlier weeks, liquids would just spill all over me because I just didn't have enough clearance. And that brings us into week 7, when I got cleared to basically be back to normal. My exercise didn't have limitations as weeks passed. So that's when I started working running into my hikes up our hill, not only to continue to lose weight to fit the part as Elijah and Counter Threat, but also to work on how I run and how I handle firearms to really fit that part. I also was able to chew again, although she did say don't go 0 to 100 immediately. So she wanted me to start with soft foods, but she said within the next couple weeks I'll be able to notice a huge difference on what I can eat. And that's exactly what happened, but not too fast. The next day I saw my orthodontist so they could replace my brackets. First time they've done that in like a month and a half. But then that led to the brackets really interfering with my gum and creating severe mouth pain, which I kind of felt like was honestly the worst part of the entire recovery. Normally, if you've gone through something like this wouldn't necessarily happen to you. Just based on the timing and what they were doing, it really ended up being just as bad as the first week, if not a little worse. I got these really bad sores on my lip and tongue, and it was the worst feeling ever. It felt like somebody was stabbing a knife. And that was like the week that I was planning to go back on camera, but it was so obvious that I had this sore that I felt a little insecure about it. And it wasn't even just that, it was like it hurt so bad to even open my mouth, let alone talk well. So that's when I started taking some ibuprofen again and started taking the special rinse, and it finally diminished as I was going into week 8, and that's when I started getting into harder foods into my diet. I started with only stuff like quesadillas, mac and cheese, burritos, but into week 8 I was able to eat stuff like cookies and chips and burgers. And that only increased my ability into week 9, and that's when I started being able to feel confident to go out and socialize and hang out with friends. And now this brings us to the end of week 10 as I'm filming this, and honestly I feel normal despite numbness. I'm still dealing with numbness in my jaw, chin, and lips. That's been the biggest thing to get used to. My surgeon told me at our last post-op appointment that it could take 1 to 2 years potentially to completely go away. But if that's the only thing I have to deal with, then I'm great, because despite that, I can do everything I was doing before, but honestly more, now that I don't have to deal with sleep apnea and really any migraines. So I expect this to probably get better as we get into 2024, but it has been a very gradual process over the last 2 months. Not too much improvement. It's something that really doesn't affect my way to live. In fact, since I'm still a little numb right here, doing the stunts for Counter Threat actually might be kind of fun because I might not be able to feel some of the stunts that I'm doing. One of the stunts I'm actually doing is jumping onto a car because that's how we implemented the surgery footage into the movie. It's perfect because this is literally the numbest part of my entire face. I hope you learned a little something from this video, and thank you guys so much for the prayers as well. It's been really helpful, and I'm really excited to get into filming Counter Threat Divine Revelation. The plan is to start filming next month in July. So stay tuned for more updates. Other than that, if you like this video, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and see you guys tomorrow for your Weather Sundays, and a week from now for your Creative Saturdays. Peace.